I chose the poem A Poem for My Wife by David Meltzer. First off, his background. He was born on February 17th, 1937, and he died December 31st, 2016. His parents got divorced when he was around 11 years old. He was born in Rochester, New York, but then moved to California at a very young age. He wrote this piece to describe a personal growth that he went through with his relationship with his wife, and he wants to show the audience the importance of communication and vulnerability. Meltzer wrote this piece during the Beat Generation, which was something that went on in the San Francisco area. There aren't many references to society, but instead relationships. The poem does a good job of connecting to many different types of people and different types of relationships. The poem doesn't connect to political views at this time, though. Unlike some poetry, the writing doesn't have much of a different effect on today's world than it did when it was written. The poetry still has an important message on relationships and the ability to be open in relationships. So this is the poem. I'm in my room writing, speaking in myself, and I hear you. Move down the hallway to water your plants. I write truth on the page. I strike the word over and over. Yet I worry you'll pour too much water on the plants, and the water will overflow into the books, ruining them. If I can't speak out of myself, how can I tell you I don't care about the plants? How can I tell you I don't care if the books get wet? We've been together 7 years, and only now do I begin clearing my throat to speak to you. At the beginning, he begins to set up the author's perspective while writing the poem. He explains that he's in his room writing, speaking in myself, and then he continues by describing the actions of his wife by explaining that she is down the hallway. Continuing, he goes back to himself and describes himself writing. He writes, I write truth on the page, I strike the word over and over from lines 6 to 7. This begins to describe how he's anxious in communicating with his wife. Then he begins to explain his worries. He describes how he worries his wife will pour too much water on the plants and the water will overflow onto the books, ruining them in lines 8 through 11. And then he continues by questioning himself and his inability to speak out towards his emotions. And then he ends this by describing his personal growth and how he finally branches out and tells his wife his feelings. Throughout the poem, there isn't a major pattern that the author decides to use. He writes it in more of like a chronological storytelling type pattern, but it doesn't have like a traditional pattern. This allows the reader to have a better connection with the poet because he's able to share his emotions whenever he wants to. It also allows him to be more genuine and raw in describing what occurred and how he felt when he went through this. One prevalent theme in this is that even though people might have relationships that have formed for long periods of time, there are many hidden truths that have not been expressed. This is seen in the lines 15 through 16, which say, only now do I begin clearing my throat to speak to you, which shares how it's been a long time, but he's finally starting to show this hidden truth in himself. Another one is lines 11 through 13 when he writes, if I can't speak out of myself, how can I tell you I don't care about the plants? How can I tell you I don't care about if the books get wet? Which shows him like questioning these truths and sharing how there's just hidden things in the relationship still. And they provide emphasis on the message of hidden truths can hurt relationships at a certain point. Another theme that comes up, connecting with the previous one, is that deep personal connections can falter with a lack of vulnerability and communication. This is seen in lines 6 through 7 when he writes, I write truth on the page, I strike the word over and over. And also in lines 12 through 13 when he says, how can I tell you I don't care about the plants? How can I tell you if I don't care if the books get wet? These both add emphasis on the importance of openness in relationships and the disconnects that not being open can cause on relationships. Lastly, a theme that can be seen throughout the piece is although worries can cause caution in relationships, It can also cause unnecessary anxiety that can lead to a disconnect in the relationship if it's not communicated. This is seen in lines 8 through 9 when he says, "I worry you'll pour too much water on the plants." And this is also seen in lines 10 through 11 when he says, "The water will overflow onto the books, ruining them." Both of these show some type of worriness or anxiousness that the author has, and it shows how like his fears are limiting his ability to communicate with his wife. Literary devices, there's symbolism. You can see that in "I hear you move down the hallway to water your plants." The symbolism is in the watering of the plants because it symbolizes like the nurturing of their relationship and how the wife is like able to do that, but he hasn't really gotten this yet. And it also shows how he wants to get to this point. And then there's imagery in lines 3 through 4 when he writes, "I hear you move down the hallway." And then this kind of adds descriptions right at the beginning of the poem, which shares that he's not completely open with his wife at the beginning. And instead of being in a similar space, there's some type of barrier that is separating him and his wife. Then he also uses rhetorical questions. He uses, "How can I tell you I don't care about the plants? How can I tell you I don't care if the books get wet?" in lines 12 through 13. Adding this allows the poet to the reader to stop and think about like the questions, and obviously he's not actually like asking these questions for the reader to figure out, but it shows his like growth and his desire to change and communicate better with his wife. He uses a hyperbole when he writes, "I strike the word over and over" in line 7. He's not striking the words, but instead it shows the extent to which he's writing his truths down. It helps the reader understand how the miscommunication affects him, and it also pushes the idea of how important openness is in relationships. And then he uses repetition of the word water, which is also a symbol of a force that is hurting their relationship. He starts by saying he fears that she will pour too much water on the plants. Then he brings up water again by saying the water will overflow onto the books. And then he ends it with saying, "How can I tell you I don't care about if the books get wet?" This continues the idea about how he doesn't care about these issues. He just wants a meaningful relationship with his wife, and using repetition emphasizes the importance of nurturing in their relationship. Meltzer uses a descriptive and reflective tone while describing his relationship with his wife during this time. He uses a lot of reflections and questions. He asks, "How can I tell you?" several times throughout the piece to share that he is reflecting on his communication with his wife. The mood of this piece is very open and pensive. He's describing one of his weaknesses, which can be difficult to do. After explaining his bad communication skills he has, he writes, "We've been together 7 years, and now do I begin clearing my throat to speak with you?" This kind of shows like something that he's not proud of, but he's willing to share how he's grown. The narrator of this piece is some man. This man could be David Meltzer, and there's reason to believe that this is because his parents divorced, which could definitely put some type of effect on the way that he has relationships and the openness that he has because of this going on in his life at such a young age. This poem is written in first person point of view, so it could be describing something that the poet went through as well, just sharing like a better way and not being in third person, which would share like somebody else's experiences. The poet starts with, "I'm in my room writing," which shows the first person point of view. And then he writes, "We've been together 7 years, and only now do I begin starting to clear my throat to speak to you," which shows how this could be a definite possibility for him and his wife because they were together for more than 7 years. And it was during the time that this writing got published. I chose this poem initially because I liked reading pieces that were like meant for somebody else and not just meant for more of a general group of people. I think they're more heartwarming and nice to read. And then I personally connect with the idea of not feeling like you can communicate with others. This is seen in an extreme version with the narrator and like the ability to not communicate with your wife. But I think that everybody has times where they don't feel comfortable speaking their emotions with a certain person. My favorite line is "Only now do I begin clearing my throat to speak with you," which is lines 15 through 16. It shows that the growth that the speaker and the poet goes through and the ability that like they can recognize that. I think this connects with me because I think sometimes everybody can just not like recognize their personal growths and not see that they're growing, and I think that this is a very important thing for somebody to be able to do. And then here are my questions. Do you think the length of the poem hurts or helps the meaning and story of the poem because the piece is definitely shorter than a lot of other poetry? And then what do you think the effect would be if the narrator wrote this in third person, and because right now it's in first person, and what do you think that this would do to like the effect or the meaning of the story? Do you think that the author missed details that would help understand the better context with him and his wife? And because it's such a short piece, I don't know if there are details that would help somebody who's reading it for like the first time or second time understand the relationship between him and his wife. And then that's it.